We're all good to go.
Thanks, Eric.
You're welcome.
All right, I will call to order this April 12th, 2022 meeting of Lawrence County Board of Commissioners. Would all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a brief moment of silence. Joe, would you lead us to the pledge?
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All please remain standing for a brief moment of silence. Thank you. Vanessa, please call the roll.
Commissioner Spielvogel?
Here.
Commissioner Vogler?
Here.
Commissioner Boyd?
Here. Row officer reports and comments. We have no representatives of row officers with us today. Public comments. Jerry, you have anything?
Nothing.
All's good in the world? There we go.
Busy but good.
Good.
Fiscal and contractual, the only thing we have today are 3 warrant registers dated April 8th, April 6th, and April 4th. I'll get my closing minute, check those over.
Yeah.
Take a motion to accept it.
Thank you, because I normally try to read them in
Right.
advance and I didn't get a chance
I
to,
didn't
so
either.
thank you for your indulgence.
So moved.
I'll second and then I have a question.
What do you got?
The format changes partway through. I don't know if you noticed that. If you go toward the end of your, well, not the final document, but the third, or the one next to the last.
Mhm.
You see how that's structured differently?
Mhm.
I know these come from the controller's office. Any reason for the change in the format? Does anyone know?
I don't know, and I'm not gonna fancy a guess.
That's okay.
I will say that the one is very clearly for Munis, which is our financial accounting
Right.
software.
Right.
And the other does not mention Munis, so I don't know if they use a separate system.
And again, I'm
Right.
just curious. Actually, maybe a little bit easier to read, but
Mhm.
I wonder if they put the regular reoccurring bills in the Munis and are paying them out of there, because
Got
when I
it.
look at it, it
Yes.
looks like a lot of our foster care
Okay.
and our typical
That's right.
calling in
Mhm.
and things of that nature. That's just a guess.
And then the other thing, these are all EFTs, so I don't know if they're sending physical checks out at all.
Gotcha.
that might
That could be it.
That might.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I'll stand with my second to the motion.
All right, we have motion second for discussion, hearing none, question on the motion, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign, motion carries. Up next, we have minutes from Tuesday, April 5, 2022. Down to my colleagues, minute, check those over, and take a motion to approve. Or,
So moved.
I'll second.
motion and second, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, question on the motion, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We have no written correspondence today. Nothing in that category. And,
Probably wondering what I'm doing here. I'm very curious. Just trying to. Putting something down.
Oh, yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Why does Dan want my agenda? Does he have one of his own?
Well, I thought I was thinking there's even different ones,
Yeah.
mix up.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good, you're good. Commissioner reports and comments. I was trying to remember what came after presentation of written communications, and I just couldn't, many times as we've gone through these exercises, I just couldn't do it. Staff reports, do you have anything above and beyond?
No.
Commissioner reports, Loretta, you're on deck.
Yes, thank you. My voice is back.
So I do have several comments that I would like to make. Take a minute this morning to address comments made at our previous commissioners meeting from last Tuesday, and then the subsequent article that appeared in the Newcastle News the following day. These comments were made by Commissioner Boyd. First comment pertained to the 3 unbudgeted desks costing $900 that were purchased when his decision was overridden by Commissioner Vogler and myself. The desks, first of all, did not cost $900. They were $600, and one of them was for me. They weren't specifically named in the budget, but neither are paper clips, staples, pens, pencils, paper, etc. They were purchased from a line item each department in the courthouse complex has, materials and supplies. There was money in that line item, so the desks were purchased. Each commissioner has equal say in any decision made. 2 votes are needed to either move something forward or to stop it from happening. There was no override, as Commissioner Boyd stated. There were 2 yes votes to purchase the desks, therefore it happened. Commissioner Boyd also commented about the grant for the safety upgrades to Quaker Falls, a county-owned park. He said a previous grant application cost Lawrence County $85,000 because we weren't chosen to receive competitive funds. He said, luckily we had a surplus at the time, but the surplus was dwindling. I beg to differ, but I will elaborate on that in a minute. I guess the most troubling statement made by Commissioner Boyd referenced watching spending closely to avoid layoffs for next year. Because of that statement, I've received numerous phone calls and text messages, not only from employees worried about their jobs, but also from residents concerned that there might be a tax increase due to this deficit. Those calls and texts are the main reason for my response to Commissioner Boyd's statements. Inflation is at an all-time high. Gas prices have spiked. It costs more to put food on the table. People have lost jobs. Some may be on the verge of losing their homes. Adult children have moved back into their parents' houses because it's too difficult to try to make it on their own. COVID has changed everyone's lives. The ripple effects are yet to be determined, but they will be great. People are living with more stress and anxiety than ever before. It is not fair to add to that stress and anxiety by mentioning the word layoff. It is not fair to add to that stress and anxiety by having residents worry about a possible tax increase due to this deficit. The previous Trump administration realized the effects of the COVID crisis and responded by providing funds through the CARES Act to help government entities continue operations without cutting services. As COVID continued to overwhelm the country, the current Biden administration also responded by providing funds through the American Recovery Plan Act to continue to help governments continue to operate without cutting services. Lawrence County received $16.8 million through the ARPA funding. Of that funding, we can use up to $10 million at our discretion. We received half of the monies last year and will receive the second installment in August or September of this year. Commissioner Boyd mentioned $3 million in operating reserve funds, but neglected to mention the additional monies available in other line items of the budget. I asked for and received a county financial report from our controller, David Prestapine. It is his responsibility to keep track of the county finances, including the money in the bank. I will share them with you now. In our general fund, we currently have $6,184,000. Our COVID-19 fund has $8,292,000. Our capital expenditures fund has $1.5 million. And our operating reserve at this point in time has $2.75 million. That's a total of $18 million in our bank accounts. And that does not include the additional $8.4 million that we will receive later in the year. Yes, We can use the monies for infrastructure enhancements, including water and sewer lines and utility expansion throughout the county. We can use the monies to help upgrade the airport, enhance our workforce development efforts, and even to fix playgrounds and other recreational areas. But as far as I'm concerned, we will first use the monies to get us through any deficit or shortfall we encounter. Whether it be $500,000 for this year or $1 million for next year, or a combination of both. I don't want anyone to misunderstand me. We need to do our best to control spending. However, we are not on the verge of bankruptcy either. This is probably the first time in many, many years, if ever, that the county has had such a monetary surplus. And it will probably never happen again. So we need to use the monies wisely, but not at the expense of our employees or taxpayers or our consumers that rely on our services. I know I am only one vote, but I will say here and now that I will not vote to cut services, lay off employees, or raise taxes while there is at least $10 million sitting in our bank accounts. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. So first and foremost, with the materials and supplies line item out of the Office of the Commissioners, at the time of the purchase, which was at the end of quarter one, we had budgeted $5,000 out of that line item. There were $1,444 already spent in that line. That's a linear line item, which means that as time progresses, we use roughly, in other words, if 1% of the year progresses, we use roughly 1% of the funds in that account as the year progresses. Based on what was already there before those desks were purchased, we were already, based on that projection, $776 over budget. If those desks were indeed $600, that places us just under that line item at $1,376 in deficit in that specific line item. And again, that's a pattern that we're seeing right now throughout the budget. And again, I'm analyzing that further right now. With regard to the surplus funding, first of all, that's not surplus funding, that's reserve funding. There's a big difference there. When a household is going to balance their budget, right? So for example, let's say you make $50,000 in any given year. If you spend $60,000, you're not in good financial shape. If you spend $75,000, you're even worse financial shape. Right now, the county is looking at a general fund whereby next year will probably be around $40 million in general fund spending. Our deficit is likely to be around $1 million. We have absolutely no expectation of raising revenues on the other side to plug that deficit. It's just simply impossible given our current economic state. Which means if we continue to draw down reserves, which are reserves, it's very different from an operational surplus or an operational deficit year over year. Your household salary versus your household expenses versus your savings account. That's what we're talking about here. It's fiscally irresponsible. In fact, it's absolute atrocious fiscal policy to draw down reserves without any expectation of replenishing those reserves or refilling those reserves, because what you're doing is you're creating a massive fiscal deficit. That's what we saw in 2018 and 2019, and that's what caused us to have to raise taxes in 2020. The reality was there was a $2 million deficit over $2 million deficit in 2018 and over a $2 million deficit in 2019, which again, when we inherited this, when this board came online, the only choice we had because of that spending was either A, to raise taxes, or B, to cut services. At the time, because this board was new and we hadn't yet dove into the operations of the county, we elected to make the decision unanimously, I'll add, to raise taxes. At the same time, with those reserve funds right now, the only scenario in which we will not have to raise taxes after we expend this funding is if we invest this funding in economic development, if we invest this funding in infrastructure. Right now, we're looking at building out a potential business park in Mahoning Township. We've already received preliminary figures from our economic development team, from our engineers, from the developers looking at putting that field in, that business park in, that could cost upwards of total $18 to $20 million just to prep the land for that site and bring in economic windfall to this county, prepare this county for future development. Stonecrest itself right now is running into some small issues relating to stream relocations, and it's absolutely critical that we land that development. If we spend one-time federal stimulus funding to plug a budget gap that is not the result of COVID-19, and I want to be very clear on that. The budget gap right now is not the result of COVID-19. Our revenues right now have stabilized to pre-COVID numbers, and the year-over-year revenues have stabilized to pre-COVID numbers. In other words, any deficit that we incur is not the result of COVID-19 spending, and that deficit will not go away once we deplete reserves. So in other words, what you're advocating for, if you decide to go into $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $5 million out of our reserve funds, you're advocating for a tremendous tax hike upon the depletion of those reserves, which is what we saw in 2020. In the Newcastle News, pull up the article here, back when you were running for office, you made the statement, quote, economic development is one thing, quote, she concluded, but, quote, we need to do our own housekeeping. The budget is tight and we have to make sure this money is spent wisely. If we can only afford a hamburger, we can't go out and buy steak, or sooner or later, we won't have any money to buy a hamburger either. That's exactly the policy you're advocating for right now.
I only mentioned 2 years. 2 years.
That's all it took the last time.
That's 2 years. We need to stabilize. And let's hope that our economic development efforts are leading us in a different direction. At this point in time, right now, I will definitely advocate that money be used to stabilize. And if it needs to be revisited, it needs to be revisited.
There is no we're already stabilized from COVID-19. There is no stabilization. We are right now in a normal pattern of fiscal operations. We have totally stabilized from COVID-19. Any deficit now is the result of a lack of revenue growth while our expenses continue to grow. If we do not invest this money in economic development, and by the way, to get $1 million to $5 million, which is what we're on track for in terms of deficit by 2026 right now, that would take more economic development and more increases in assessed buildings in this property than we've seen in the last 10 years combined. You can't budget on hope. You have to budget on facts and statistics and financial realities. And again, right now, using your words, we're buying steak when we can only afford hamburger if we decide to tap into those reserves.
I think we're buying hamburger already. I stand by my statements.
So you're okay with a tax increase?
I stand by my statements. There will not be a tax increase. I will not.
Then you're okay. So you're okay, totally depleting the reserves, and then just like what we did in 2020, just like what we did in 2020.
2 years. I mentioned this year, and I mentioned next year.
So you're okay balancing potentially, call it this year, next year, call it $2 million, which we might be seeing. Call it $2 million, $1.5 to $2 million. That might be the difference between attracting a significant business park in Lawrence County and continuing our decline.
Well, let's not forget the amounts of money that are in part of the infrastructure bill. There is a lot of money tranches out there that we can tap into, and we are doing that. So I say for now, sure we are. I've been meeting with Senator Casey's office concerning a lot of different things. We talked about the airport expansion. There's $2 million that could be available right there that maybe we were putting aside.
Maybe.
For that, correct.
Maybe.
So in this instance, in this interim, we need to let people know that we have options at this point in time, other than a layoff. Other than a layoff. You mentioned the word layoff. People don't need to hear that.
Well, I'll tell you this right now, and I'll tell you this right now. I will not vote for an unbalanced budget going into 2023. If you want to vote for fiscal irresponsibility, if you want to spend more in a year than we bring in, that's on you.
And we'll see what happens when the budget comes around. We will. It's that simple. I stand by what I say.
All right. Dan, you got the privilege of following up from that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's healthy discussion. I
Yes,
enjoyed hearing
I
both
agree.
of your remarks. I'll limit mine to the fact that we are fortunate that the federal government did see fit, and you referenced both the CARES money, which have
Yes.
come in and gone out, but with the American Rescue Plan money, we do have an opportunity, I think, to find a healthy balance between the internal needs of this organization and the external needs of our community. And in talking to other commissioners from around the Commonwealth, I'm hearing a pretty common thread that they're looking to divide those dollars in such a way that it goes out into the community, whether it be through economic enhancement, social service agencies, community agencies, or partnerships with municipalities. And we've talked about all those things preliminarily. But they're also, and again, in talking with other commissioners, they've said that this gives them the opportunity to maintain a level rate of property taxes for the next few years. Reminding everyone, and we say it all the time, that the county government in Pennsylvania has one primary source of revenue, that's property tax. We're not permitted to tax wages or income the way that school districts and local cities, boroughs, and townships can do. We don't have that ability. So I'm looking forward to more healthy discussion and coming up with a consensus that allows us to balance our internal needs as well as the external needs in our community. And I think we'll achieve that. Other than that, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have. Thank you both.
The only other comment I will add to the discussion is if we decide to balance a budget, which right now has been stabilized from the effects of COVID-19, with one-time federal stimulus funding, that only leads to two outcomes. Number one is we have to go in and cut expenses once those stimulus funds run out, or once our allocated expenditures of those stimulus funds to plug the deficit run out. Number one is to cut expenses, and number two is to raise taxes. So I want to be very, very clear that if we use this funding to plug $1 million operational deficits into the taxpayers and to the people in this building, it might be a safety net for a period of a couple of years, but you will be marching towards an incredible amount of economic pain in the form of either a tax increase or in the form, candidly, of personnel cuts, because that's the only area of the operation we have left to dig into. That's where we're at right now. Jerry, aren't you glad you came to this one?
What can I say, right?
I think it's very good.
Yeah, I know,
I agree,
I
yeah.
think it is.
I do not envy you guys, that's for sure. With the decisions you guys gotta make.
all right, what resolution are we on, Vanessa?
80.
2022-80. Jared, approach the bench if you would. And what do we have going on today?
All right, so I've got two resolutions today. We'll start with the first one. I'll preface this by saying that neither of these need action upon today. So we can just simply discuss them. The very first resolution is for the annual 903 grant. This is a grant program offered by the state and reimburses half of my salary and expenses for the prior fiscal year. So it covers everything from salary, benefits, travel, stuff like that.
I have no reason to wait.
As I said, sooner we can act on something like
That's
this, the
it.
better.
Absolutely.
Jerry's very kind, but yeah, I'm ready to go today if you folks are.
And on
We
that,
generally don't hear that. It doesn't have to be acted on. We usually hear,
it's now.
we need to have this
Yeah.
done now.
No, actually, usually it's last week.
I'm trying to be ahead of it.
Yes.
All right, we'll make that 2020-80. Questions, comments for Jerry?
No.
I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Is there any further discussion here? Non-question motion, Vanessa, please call the roll.
Commissioner Spielvogel?
Yes.
Commissioner Vogler?
Yes.
Commissioner Boyd?
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you. 81, section 901B.
And so this particular grant program, the 901B program, is designated by the state for household hazardous waste and electronics public education. This is a 2-year grant that covers advertising for basically like the event you see at the, for electronics and household hazardous waste every year. It's an interesting grant program because if a municipality wants to do a program and they want to advertise for it, they actually have to go through the county to get that funding. Now, obviously they would incur it, and then we would submit the disbursement on their behalf. But this covers our advertising for the fall program. The last 2-year grant that we applied for was about $8,100. We spent about $5,000, so we're not obligated to spend the full amount. It's just simply so that we have the money to advertise the program. And if a municipality wants to advertise one as well.
All right, any questions, comments?
I'm fine.
2022-81, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second, any further discussion? Hearing none, Vanessa, please call the roll.
Commissioner Spielvogel?
Yes.
Commissioner Vogler?
Yes.
Commissioner Boyd?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thanks, Jerry.
Carry on.
Have a good morning.
See you, Jerry.
All right, 82, this is a budget amendment. This is relating to some security upgrades that we're installing at different magisterial offices. We get reimbursed through the AOPC for this, and so this budget amendment is simply reflective of those expenses, but also that reimbursement. Questions, comments on that?
Just, and maybe you might not know this, is this is all we get?
No, there
But
was,
there, because remember, as we talked, we never really know an exact number of the safety grants that we get from AOPC.
let me put it this way, we have absolutely no idea what's out there for AOPC, at least I don't, right?
Right.
Mike might.
Okay.
At the same time, we also received, it was in the budget amendment a couple weeks ago for about 13,000
Okay.
through the same program, again, for the magisterial offices.
Yes.
So I don't know what the max
Okay.
limit on that is, but right now we're up to $25,000 in security expenses from AOPC.
Obviously, it doesn't come in all at once,
Yes.
Right,
hence why we're doing the
Okay.
11,800.
very good.
Questions, comments, anything further?
Did we make the motion already?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Motion
So moved.
second. The motion is second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Question on the motion. Vanessa, please call the roll.
Commissioner Spielvogel?
Yes.
Commissioner Vogler?
Yes.
Commissioner Boyd?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Register and Recorder's Office, we have a couple admin transfers today. First is for $2,200. Prior to 2020, this line item was budgeted at an average of $6,800 due to COVID. The amount used for the past 2 years has decreased. That actually isn't due to COVID, that's due to budget constraints. Another factor is due to inflation, it's more expensive to travel. This line item had a budget amount of $4,000 for 2022. Now they are taking out of their contingency account, which is fine. That being said, once their contingency account is depleted, again, we're gonna run into issues in that part as it relates to budget. Adult probation. This is a simple one, actually. There was an increase in the insurance premium of $38.60. We're at a point where we're budgeting pretty much down to the penny. And so Jamie's transferring from his contingency into his community service insurance line item, $38.40, call $40. Again, it's due to an increase in insurance premium. Mental health. This is actually one of the ones that I did not write this year because I don't understand mental health and we don't have to pay out of pocket for it. And so they have a sizable contingency account where they have some flexibility. And again, a lot of what mental health does, they're responding to different needs of the community. So there's going to be movement just like there is in CYS in any given year. So they're moving 50,000 from a contingency account to MH, emergency and hearings.
May I ask Joe a question?
Sure can.
I understand the word emergency. Can you clarify when it says hearings? What does that involve, Joe?
Hearings are typically through 2 hearings. Once somebody is committed to the hospital, after 72 hours, we're mandated to have a hearing to continue if a longer stay is needed.
Who conducts those hearings?
It's conducted in the county, typically the county in which the hospital resides. So we used to have a hospital in Lawrence County,
Right.
which
They're all out of town.
100%, 99% were done here.
Right?
Now you're looking at Clarion having a high total, Allegheny County having a high total, and those individuals are afforded the right to have a public defender. And a public defender becomes a bill for us to pay Allegheny's.
When you say public defender, is this like a Larry Keith? Or is this a different title, different person?
No, it's a Larry Keith.
Okay. The public defender in
The
that
public
particular county.
defender typically.
So is the hearing held in front of a judge?
There's a hearing officer,
A hearing officer?
yes.
Okay. All righty.
And typically there's it's a typical court setup, to a certain extent.
Right.
Usually it's a room in the hospital.
I see. Okay. Thank you both.
So I will take a motion, I should any questions, comments, and those, to approve.
I'm sorry. I will say, since we don't have a hospital on grounds, our costs are really fluctuate and have gone up. When most of them were held in Lawrence County, we had a simple contract with with a hearing officer and so forth. But now that we don't have a hospital, those costs have fluctuated in general.
Just to clarify, someone listening might think, well, yeah, we do have a hospital, UPMC Jameson, but what's the old hospital that you might be referencing? Or
Well,
where was that?
We had the old St. Francis location,
Yes.
Jameson, and we had a ward typically, that was 100% designated
Yeah.
for mental health.
Right, whereas as you said, now we've got to go out of the county.
Yes,
Thank you,
And
thank you.
sometimes out of state.
we have on
Yeah.
occasion.
I was thinking Belmont Pines or something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. Admin transfers 1, 2, 3. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Question on the motion. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. No ordinances. Next regularly scheduled commissioners meeting is for 10 a.m. on Tuesday, April 19th, 2022 in the commissioners meeting room. We have a prison board meeting on Wednesday, April 20th. We have a planning commission meeting on, like I said, tomorrow. And also, this is another board we serve on, we're in the West Central Job Partnership. And we have a meeting up in Mercer relating to that. That's our workforce development fund, about $11.5 million in workforce development funding. Runs through that organization. I'll note that I'm actually going to be at FPC next week on the 19th. They're bringing in some individuals, some consultants to basically give a high-level briefing on broadband deployment. And again, after reviewing that report, that's an area of the operation that I do think, whether it comes from the state, whether it comes from one-time federal funds, wherever it comes from, I think we do actually, and I keep believing saying this.
I know.
Joe's looking at me. Joe has been, we've been very adamant throughout this. There's other needs than broadband. Joe's looking at me smiling.
Only because he has the antenna with the tin foil.
But believe it or not, Plain Grove Township, Mahoney's pretty bad.
It's awful.
Mahoney's in terms of broadband. Plain Grove
Plain
Township
Grove,
has some of the best in the country. They got MD County.
With all due respect, I have to have a satellite dish. Cable's not even up down the road.
No, I
Cable is not an
can't
option.
get cable either. I have to live in the ditch.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh.
So I'm going down to Pittsburgh on Tuesday just to get briefed on that and start talking about Pennsylvania
Very good.
Broadband Authority. They're looking at federal funding deployment next year for that.
You would think that there would have to be an entire state project so that everyone is on board
There
with the
is.
same things.
So if
Yes.
we're to get the federal
Right.
funding, I can't believe how much I've dove into this over the past 2 weeks. I was so adamantly opposed to broadband deployment. The state actually is required to put together effectively a state broadband deployment plan.
Now we have to be
Before-
involved.
Now and thankfully SPC and Northwest have done a lot of the legwork as it relates to it. So we're not necessarily a poor position as it relates to going in and capturing some of that funding. At the same time, compared to Greene County, which already has about $36 million worth of
Yes.
projects in the chute. I know you're good friends with Shireen Hess in
Yes.
Indiana. Indiana's been doing some good things with broadband. We saw Cousin Basil yesterday in Forest.
Yes.
They put their entire CARES Act, it was only $1 million, but they put their entire CARES Act allocation to broadband. So we're not in a bad position, but we do have some catching up to do if we want to be able to tap into some of these federal funds. So I'm going to go get
We were
educated
in
on that.
denial.
We were. We weren't even in denial. It was based on the Northwest
Yeah.
Commission work, which was based on 2015, 2016, just the definitions changed, right? And now the technology's progressed, and
Right.
we've got to work on that.
I think it's your turn to run the meeting next week.
Okay,
April 15th also will be closed in observance
right.
of Good
That's
Friday.
right, yes, we're closed Friday. Yeah.
And it'll be
Yes.
in San Antonio.
Well,
Good for you.
I don't want to say anything, because every time you go away, something happens.
Oh, I'm done.
Do you know they're having brush fires and they're evacuating parts of San Antonio? I swear to you.
I'm going now. Last time I went to Texas, I was caught in the middle of a snowstorm.
I swear I heard it was on the screen.
Last time I went to Florida, the snowstorm was here and our plane couldn't take off.
Yes,
For that.
yeah.
I'll probably get caught in the
Listen, I couldn't believe when I was watching it this morning. Now, hopefully, my thought process was, hopefully by the end of the week, they'll be under control. But when it said San Antonio,
Nah, if I'm there's no scenario. No scenario. I've just accepted the fact that whenever I go away, whatever the budget amount for hotels, budget another 2 nights.
what is it? Oh my gosh, yeah.
Public comments? Anything else?
No, sir.
Adjourn.
Okay.
Very good. Yeah, I gotta return it. 1:30 in Mercer.
Yes,
Go grab coffee.
yes.
Okay, guys.
Morgan.